Hi, my name is Lena. I'm 28 years old, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person to plot a quiet rebellion against my own mother-in-law. But here we are. I grew up in a small apartment on the edge of Tacoma, where the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments and the water heater groaned like it was begging for mercy. My mom raised me on her own, working double shifts as a diner waitress, saving every extra dime for my school supplies. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I learned early on that love and loyalty aren't things you can buy. They're earned through late-night talks over instant noodles and patching up sneakers with duct tape. That's the world I came from, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let me know what your hometown taught you about life. I met Zachary in college, both of us scraping by on part-time jobs and sheer stubbornness. He was studying engineering, I was diving into UX design, and we bonded over splitting a $90 textbook by tearing it down the spine to share the chapters. We laugh about it, passing pages back and forth in the library like we were smuggling secrets. Zachary had this saying, "Love isn't a transaction, Lena, it's a choice." I believed him then, and I believe him now. He came from a different world, though, one I didn't fully grasp until later. His family had money, the kind that comes with a last name that gets you a table at any restaurant in the city. His grandfather built a shipping business from the ground up, and his dad turned it into a real estate portfolio that could make your head spin. They lived in a world of private clubs and charity galas where even the air felt expensive. When I first met Zachary's mother, Regina, I thought I was ready. I'd put on my best dress, nothing fancy, just a clean navy shift I'd found on sale, and practiced my handshake in the mirror. She greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her hand brushing mine before she reached for a napkin, wiping her fingers like I'd left a smudge. It was quick, subtle, but I caught it. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she was just particular. But then came the comments, little darts thrown with a laugh so nobody could call them cruel. At a family dinner, she introduced me as Zachary's classmate, even though we'd been dating for a year. She asked if I'd ever traveled abroad, adding, "Oh, but I suppose you've seen plenty online, haven't you?" Her friends chuckled, and I smiled, feeling my cheeks burn. Zachary squeezed my hand under the table, his jaw tight, but I didn't want him to fight my battles. Not yet. It got worse at our engagement party. Regina stood up, glass in hand, and gave a toast about building legacies with partners who share our vision. Then she turned to me, her smile sharp as a blade, and asked, "Lena, dear, what's your 5-year plan? Our family isn't one for loose ends." The room went quiet. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting for me to stumble. I just landed a UX design job after months of rejections, and I was proud of it. A solid role at a growing tech firm, nothing glamorous but honest work. Zachary jumped in, beaming, and told everyone about it. Regina nodded, sipped her wine, and said, "How quaint, a nice little start." The word little landed like a slap. Have you ever had someone make you feel small in front of a crowd? How did you handle it? Share in the comments, I'd love to hear your stories. She pushed for a prenup before the wedding. I didn't blink. I signed it right there in the lawyer's office, pen moving faster than he could explain the clauses. Regina's eyebrows shot up like she'd expected me to beg or barter. I wasn't there for their money. I was there for Zachary, for the way he made me laugh, for the way he'd stay up with me rewriting code at 2 a.m., for the way he believed in me when I doubted myself. But to Regina, love like that was a weakness. She saw me as a girl from the wrong side of town, someone who'd clawed her way into her polished world with nothing but a laptop and ambition. She called me resourceful once, but the way she said it made it sound like I was scavenging. When we bought our first house, Zachary and I split the down payment. My half came from years of side gigs and a small inheritance from my grandmother, who'd left me just enough to feel like she was still cheering me on. Regina toured the place, her heels clicking on the hardwood, and called it a charming fixer-upper. Later, I overheard her telling a friend Zachary had gifted me the house, like I hadn't paid a cent. That's when I knew she wasn't just judging me, she was rewriting me. The worst came a few months after we settled in. Regina showed up one weekend, saying she wanted to help us organize. I'd spent weeks setting up the kitchen, arranging things that meant something to me. A set of cast iron skillets my mom had saved for, a chipped ceramic bowl from my grandmother's Sunday dinners. They weren't fancy, but they were mine, pieces of a life I'd built from scratch. I came back from a quick errand to find 2 trash bags by the curb, one clinking with broken pottery. Regina stood in the kitchen, wiping her hands, and said she'd tidied up the clutter. She suggested I could replace it all with something more suitable from a department store. Zachary was furious, his voice shaking as he told her to leave. She didn't. Instead, she turned to me, eyes flashing, and said, "You'll never belong here, Lena. You're just a coder who got lucky." That was the moment I stopped trying to win her over. I didn't want her approval anymore. I wanted her to see me, really see me. And I had a plan to make that happen. That day in the kitchen, with Regina's words still ringing in my ears, something shifted inside me. Her calling me a coder who got lucky wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration of war. But I wasn't going to fight her with shouting matches or tearful pleas. I'd learned from my mom that the loudest battles are often won in silence, with patience and a plan. Regina thought she could erase me, starting with the things I loved most. Those trash bags by the curb, filled with my grandmother's bowl and my mom's skillets, weren't just clutter to me, they were proof of where I came from, of the women who taught me to stand tall. Regina didn't just toss them out, she tossed out my story. And that was a mistake. Have you ever had someone try to take away something that defines you? What did you do to take it back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Zachary was ready to cut her off right then. His face was red, his hands clenched, and I'd never seen him so close to losing it. He told Regina to get out, his voice low and sharp like he was holding back a storm. She just stood there, chin lifted, tears welling up like she was the victim. "Lena, turning you against me," she said, her voice trembling for effect. "She's manipulative, Zachary, can't you see?" I didn't say a word. I just picked up her coat from the chair, folded it neatly, and set it by the door with her purse. She gasped like I'd slapped her and stormed out, muttering about how she wouldn't be treated like trash by some girl who thinks she's family. Zachary wanted to go no contact, to shut her out for good. I put a hand on his arm and said, "Not yet, let me handle this." He looked at me, confused, but nodded. He trusted me, and that was enough. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry. Anger burns out fast if you let it. No, I was awake because I was thinking, piecing together a strategy like I was designing a user interface. Clean, deliberate, every move leading to the next. Regina saw me as a gold digger, someone who'd sneaked into her world to steal her son and her status. Fine. If she wanted to cast me as the villain, I'd play the part, but on my terms. I wasn't going to beg for her respect or try to prove I was good enough. Instead, I'd show her what her world looked like through my eyes, the ones she thought were too low class to matter. My plan wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. I wanted her to feel what it's like to be judged, to be stripped of your armor, to have to earn your place. The opportunity came faster than I expected. A few weeks later, Regina called Zachary in a panic. She'd sunk money into a flashy co-op condo project that promised luxury and prestige, only to find out it was a scam. Not enough to ruin her, but enough to dent her lifestyle. She had to let go of her part-time housekeeper, cancel her premium gym membership, and sell off a few of her vintage handbags. She sounded shaken, her voice thinner than usual, and asked if she could stay with us for a bit while her own place was under maintenance. Zachary hesitated, glancing at me. I nodded and said, "We'll make it work." He looked surprised, but I just smiled. This was step one, bring her into my territory. I didn't rush things. I let her settle into the guest room, let her think she was still in control. She arrived with 3 suitcases, her perfume trailing behind her like a signature. I greeted her warmly, handed her a key, and showed her the space I'd prepared. The room was comfortable but plain cotton sheets from our college days, a thrift store lamp, a small rug I'd found at a garage sale. Nothing like the silk and mahogany she was used to. She raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. I kept my voice light, saying, "We're keeping things simple around here, hope you don't mind." She gave a tight smile and said, "Of course not, dear." But I saw her fingers twitch, like she was itching to rearrange the room to her standards. The first morning, she sat at the kitchen table, scrolling her phone, clearly expecting breakfast to appear. I grabbed my laptop bag, checked my watch, and said, "I've got a client meeting at 9. There's cereal in the pantry, and the market's a 10-minute walk if you need anything." I left a note with bus routes and a coupon for a local grocery store clipped to it. She stared at it like it was written in another language. When I got home that evening, she'd gone shopping, came back with a tiny bag holding a bottle of sparkling water, a wedge of artisanal cheese, and a jar of fig preserves, all charged to Zachary's card. She left the receipt on the counter, bold as anything. I didn't react. Instead, I logged into our accounts that night, froze that card, and moved our joint savings to a new account with just our names. I texted Zachary, "Trust me on this." He replied with a thumbs up. Step 2, set boundaries she couldn't cross. I started small, weaving changes into her routine like threads in a web. I forgot to restock her favorite lavender tea and replaced her imported mineral water with a filtered pitcher from the fridge. When she asked about the espresso machine, I said we'd lent it to a neighbor. I swapped the soft bath towels for thinner ones from a discount bin, clean but scratchy. She noticed but didn't complain, not yet. I could see her trying to keep her composure, like she was determined to outlast me. So I pushed a little further. I suggested she help with small tasks, just to keep things fair. I handed her a notebook and asked her to track pantry inventory, paper towels, canned goods, dish soap. She laughed, called it cute, and said she wasn't a secretary. I just nodded and said, "No problem, I'll handle it." The next day, we ran out of her preferred almond milk. The day after, the hand soap was down to a sliver. By the third day, she was jotting notes in that notebook, her handwriting sharp and precise. Then I took it up a notch. I told our part-time cleaner, Marla, to take a couple of weeks off, saying we wanted some family privacy. I asked Regina if she'd mind pitching in with light chores, just the basics to keep things cozy. Her eyes narrowed, but she agreed, probably thinking she could do it with a flick of her wrist. I showed her how to scrub the sink, how to fold towels so they didn't smell musty, how to sweep the porch without kicking up dust. She did it, lips pressed tight, like each task was a personal insult. I thanked her every time, my voice sweet as pie, and left little reminders around the house. A bottle of budget dish soap by the sink, a stack of reusable rags instead of paper towels. She started muttering under her breath, things like "this is absurd" and "I'm not a maid." I just smiled and kept going. One evening, I invited Zachary's cousin Leela and her husband over for coffee. They'd always been kind to me, keeping their distance from Regina's drama. I made sure Regina was in the kitchen when they arrived, handing her a dish towel as I passed by to open the door. She served the coffee in mugs I'd picked up at a thrift store, ones she'd once sniffed at for being mismatched. Leela complimented the cozy vibe, and Regina forced a smile, her hands gripping the tray a little too tight. After they left, she sat at the table, staring at the empty mugs, and asked if we had any of the good dish soap left, the kind that didn't smell like bleach. I said, "Nope, but the lemon one's on sale this week." She washed the dishes anyway. That's when I knew I was getting under her skin, but I wasn't done. Regina thought she could judge me from her high horse. I was about to show her how it felt to ride in the saddle I grew up in. The moment Regina started scribbling in that notebook, tracking our pantry stock like it was her new mission, I knew the groundwork was set. She wasn't broken, not even close, but she was starting to bend, just enough for me to see the cracks in her polished armor. My plan wasn't about humiliating her. It was about holding up a mirror, showing her the world she'd sneered at through my eyes. I'd grown up counting pennies, stretching leftovers, and finding pride in making things work. Regina thought that made me lesser. Now she was about to live it. Have you ever had to adapt to a lifestyle that felt foreign to you? What was the toughest part? Share your story in the comments. I kept the changes subtle at first, letting them seep into her routine like water into dry soil. When Zachary left for a week-long work trip, Regina's demeanor shifted. She got bolder, testing boundaries. She'd slam cabinet doors, leave her scarf draped over the couch, and crank up her favorite talk shows until the walls hummed. One morning, I found my work laptop shoved onto a garage shelf, a sticky note on the dining table reading, "This is for eating, not typing." She deleted a draft of a client wireframe in the process, claiming it was an accident. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even mention it. Instead, I opened a new document on my phone, titled Thrifty Queen Log, and started noting every move she made, dates, times, details. She had no idea I was keeping score. I adjusted our household rhythm to match my childhood, the one she'd called low class. Dinner became simple: canned beans with rice, frozen veggies tossed in a skillet, instant oatmeal for breakfast. I told her we were saving for a long-term goal, dropping lines like, "Every dollar we keep today is freedom tomorrow." She nodded, but I caught her grimacing at the bland meals, dousing everything with salt like it could mask the difference. When her boutique gym membership lapsed, she left the renewal notice on the counter, expecting me to offer. I handed her a flyer for free yoga classes in the park instead, saying, "It's all about wellness on a budget." She stared at it, then tucked it under a magnet shaped like a coin. A few days later, I taped a list to the fridge: thoughtful Mother's Day gifts under $10. Handmade cards, jarred spices, a coupon for a coffee date. She read it, slammed the fridge door, and walked away. I replaced it with a whiteboard that read, "Small gestures, big heart." I invited my friend Tara over for tea, someone who'd built a career helping families on tight budgets. Over plain biscuits, Tara shared how she'd once lived on $20 a week, buying bulk rice and skipping meals to save for rent. Regina shifted in her chair, her smile stiff but stayed quiet. When Tara offered her a lift home, Regina asked for a cab instead. Tara handed her a flyer for a local thrift drive and smiled. That night, I hung a framed photo in the living room, a snapshot of the cramped studio I'd rented after college, labeled where it began. Regina saw it the next morning and asked if I was mocking her. I said, "It's a reminder of what's possible." She didn't respond. One afternoon, I left my laptop open, my savings account on display, steady, modest, earned through years of late nights and side gigs. I stepped out for a call, making sure Regina passed by. When I returned, she was sitting in the armchair, her posture rigid. Later, she asked, point blank, if I was hiding money. I raised an eyebrow and said, "I thought gold diggers didn't have their own cash." "Right?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She started calling Zachary every night after that, complaining that the house felt cold, that she was invisible. He listened, then one evening said, "Mom, you're just living the life you thought Lena chose. Isn't it humbling?" She went quiet. I overheard her threaten to leave. I didn't stop her. I packed her bags myself, folding her clothes neatly, tagging each suitcase with a bright orange clearance sticker. I added a note. "Thanks for visiting. Simplicity suits you." She didn't go. She carried the bags back upstairs, silent, and the next morning, she was wiping down the counters without being asked. That's when I launched what I called Makeover Week. I pitched it to Regina as a fun challenge, a chance to embrace a smart, chic lifestyle and maybe share it with her social circle. She perked up at the idea of bragging rights, so I showed her a list of free beauty services at a local training salon, haircuts and manicures by students. She hesitated at the peeling paint on the salon's walls but sat down. I got a decent trim. She ended up with choppy layers that made her wince. I called it edgy European. She didn't laugh. The next day, we hit a thrift store, which I framed as a vintage treasure hunt. She rifled through racks for an hour, searching for a designer label, then gave up when she found a sweater with someone's initials stitched inside. I handed her a knockoff handbag I'd bought online, swearing it looked authentic. She carried it to brunch with her friends, grinning, until one leaned in and whispered something. She came home and dropped the bag by the door, her face tight. Midweek, I accidentally knocked over a tiny bottle in the guest bathroom, thinking it was a sample. It was her designer perfume, now a puddle on the tile. I apologized and left a drugstore scent in its place. She didn't notice the switch until she wore it to a charity event. An hour in, she called me, her voice low and frantic, saying people were recoiling. I suggested it was nerves and hung up. She showered for 20 minutes when she got home. I kept the pressure steady, introducing her to my friend Faye, who ran a budget cleaning service. I mentioned Zachary wanted to visit Regina's condo soon, and suddenly she was asking for Faye's number. I handed her a clearance rack robe embroidered with Thrifty Star and suggested a spa night with dollar store face masks and cold cucumber slices. She sat through it, shivering, muttering about trendy nonsense. By the end of the week, I gave her a homemade certificate, Thrifty Star Graduate First Step to Grounded Glam. I framed it and left it on her nightstand. She moved it behind her lamp but didn't throw it out. Then I noticed something. She stopped using the term gold digger. Not in snide remarks, not in passing. Once, describing a neighbor's new ring, she paused mid-sentence and changed the topic. It wasn't remorse, not yet. It was caution. She was starting to see I could outplay her at her own game, and she wasn't sure how far I'd take it. That's when I knew the transformation was taking root, but I wasn't ready to ease up. Regina needed to feel the weight of her own judgments before she could let them go. Regina's silence in the days following Makeover Week wasn't the kind that screamed defiance. It was softer, heavier, like she was carrying something new. I watched her move through the house with a different rhythm, less strut, more purpose. She stopped leaving her shoes in the hallway, stopped blasting her talk shows, and started stacking dishes in the sink without a sigh. I didn't point it out. I didn't need to. The shift was there, small but real, like a seedling breaking through concrete. I'd spent weeks weaving a world where Regina had to face her own biases, and now I could see her starting to adapt. But I wasn't ready to call it a victory, not yet. I wanted to see how deep the change would go. Have you ever seen someone start to rethink their ways? What was the moment that tipped the scale? Share in the comments. I decided to pivot, moving from subtle pressure to something more direct but still gentle. I called it Phase 2, though I didn't say that to Regina. Instead, I framed it as a chance to build something together, something practical. I found a free community course called Money Smart for Women, held at a local rec center every Wednesday night. I signed us both up and told Regina we'd get certificates at the end, like it was a badge of honor. She didn't argue, just marked the dates in her planner with a quick nod. On the first night we drove together, the car quiet except for the hum of the engine. I mentioned I hadn't brought lunch money, and she dug into her purse, a sleek leather one she hadn't replaced yet, and pulled out a crumpled $7 bill. "We'll split a sub," she said, her voice flat but not sharp. We sat on a park bench outside the center, sharing a turkey sandwich on slightly stale bread. She didn't complain about the lack of sauce or the plastic wrap sticking to the crust. She just ate. Inside, the instructor asked us to share our goals. I said I wanted to secure my future, step by step. Then I glanced at Regina and added, "My mother-in-law, here to learn how to spot opportunists." A few people chuckled. Regina's pen froze on her notebook, but she didn't correct me. She wrote something down, her face unreadable. Over the next few weeks, I saw her lean into the course, not with enthusiasm, but with focus. She started carrying a reusable tote to the store, checking prices per ounce like it was a puzzle. She sorted our mail into neat piles, labeled envelopes for bills, and even revived a grocery spreadsheet I'd abandoned months ago. One afternoon, I caught her muttering in the pantry, organizing cans of soup, saying, "I used to pay someone to fold my scarves." I lingered in the doorway just long enough for her to know I'd heard, then walked away. Evenings grew quieter. Regina stopped flipping on the TV and started flipping through old photo albums instead. One night, I passed by and saw her staring at a picture of her and Zachary's dad, sitting on a worn-out love seat in a tiny apartment, laughing. No jewelry, no designer bags, just them. I didn't say anything, but it stuck with me. She was seeing something she'd forgotten. Another night, over instant coffee, because I'd lent the coffee maker to a friend, she spoke without prompting. Her voice was low, almost fragile. "My mother-in-law called me a gold digger once," she said, stirring her mug. "Back when we were starting out, I hated her for it. It burned me up, and I swore I'd never be that woman again. But then I turned around and said it to you." She didn't look at me, just kept stirring. I nodded and said, "Words stick, don't they?" She didn't reply, but the air felt different, like a knot had loosened. The next evening, I came home late from a client pitch and found the kitchen table set. 2 plates, a pot of stew steaming in the center, the smell of cumin and onions filling the room. It was my mom's recipe, one I made for Zachary 100 times, but Regina had never touched it. She didn't say how she figured it out, no recipe card, no questions asked. It was perfect, down to the way the carrots were sliced thin to soak up the broth. We ate in silence, not awkward but heavy, like we were both chewing on more than the food. Later, I found an envelope on my nightstand, her handwriting neat but careful, like she'd rewritten it a few times. It read, "You didn't take my son or my world. You earned your place, and I didn't know what earning looked like until now. You didn't shame me. You showed me. Thank you." I read it twice, folded it, and tucked it into my drawer. I didn't mention it to her. I didn't need to. The next morning, Regina was gone. No scene, no speech, just a clean guest room, sheets folded, counters wiped, and a single lemon in the fruit bowl with a note, "For detox." I smiled at that. Old habits cling like dust. A week later, Zachary mentioned she'd started volunteering at the rec center, helping with a budgeting workshop. He didn't know much, just that she was there most Tuesdays. I checked the fridge and found a folded flyer tucked behind the grocery list, her handwriting in the corner, "Money Smart, Wednesdays, 5 p.m. She'd gone back on her own, no fanfare. I didn't bring it up with her. It wasn't my moment to claim. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about teaching Regina a lesson. It was about breaking a cycle, one that started long before me, with her own mother-in-law's words, and carried through to how she saw me. I didn't need her to grovel or apologize forever. I needed her to understand that value isn't measured in bank accounts or last names. It's in the choices we make, the way we show up, the way we learn. Regina wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we'd both shifted, just enough to see each other clearly. That was enough. What's a lesson you've learned from a tough family moment? Drop it in the comments, I'd love to hear.